How many of us are here? Hello.
I've been unmuted.
Hi, can I just test? Can you hear me properly?
Oh, great.
Right, so I'm now going to pass over to our chair, Indy Johar.
Hi, good evening. Delighted to be here and delighted to be hosting this fantastic hustings. I think what's amazing is how many people we've seen turning out for the hustings around various matters. The kind of tone of this hustings will be slightly different. We want to really push into specifics. I think it's really important. We've recognized many good people have gone into the RIBA claiming and requiring and saying evident needs around the need for change. Yet you could argue very few have really delivered the scale of change that's necessary or made the RIBA relevant. So I think on that basis, I think there's a kind of really important window of opportunity given the scale of change we're going to witness over the next 10 years and the scale of change we're right now in the middle of for our cities. So we will be seeing significant change over the course of the next presidency. And this is married by a moment where the RIBA is financially as well endowed as it's ever been and will be one of the big institutions of change, or has the capacity to be. So I think this is a really important moment for the RIBA, and it's a really important moment for a new president. So on that basis, I think we're delighted to be here with actually 5 incredible candidates. I'm going to open up this conversation by inviting every candidate to speak for 2 minutes. We've asked all the candidates to please be precise. It's really important that we move into this debate about really your environmental statements. We're looking for the candidates' kind of commitments to the environment as we see it over the next 10 years over 2 minutes. And we're not going to go into full bios of all the brilliant candidates. You've all probably seen them. What we're really moving into is the kind of all the candidates to respect the time. Can we start with Simon, please? Simon, would you come forward and give us your 2-minute environmental standard statement, please? Thank you.
Hi, Indy, thank you. And thank you for the invitation tonight. It's obviously an absolutely crucial topic. You've asked us to be clear. I think your questions frame what will the RIBA do about targets and what will the RIBA do about students. My personal view is, as architects, we are the RIBA, and the best thing we can do, whether we're teaching or practicing, is to lead by example. So we can't abdicate it to the RIBA or to the schools. The profession must step up. We all recognise there's a climate emergency, so we need to lead by example. In my view, the RIBA can do a number of key things. It can force the profession through, and it's done this pretty well through 2030 plan and the plan of work, to properly not only design and build low carbon buildings, but to evaluate them in terms of post-occupancy evaluation. And we need to capture that data and share it. We can't do it alone, and I've read the 2030 report, and I'm critical because it assumes we are in charge. We are not. We need to work with public and private clients and form an alliance or a charter that actually commits beyond us to this kind of low carbon future. We then need to capture and share that data openly and potentially anonymously, because people are worried about this in terms of insurance. If we don't learn from our mistakes and we hide it all in greenwash, we will get nowhere. So to me, 2030 is a really good element. The plan of work is there. Now it's post-occupancy insurance and data. If we capture and share data as practices and in schools, then we will build a kind of post-carbon alliance, and we can take real cases to government. In our own office, we have 4 full-time researchers. We're committed to BREEAM Outstanding and looking at embodied as well as operational energy. We've got to work together to share best practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I appreciate the brevity and actually getting to the point. I'm going to move straight on to Jude. Jude Barber, could you please give us your 2 minutes?
Oh, thanks. Yep, I'm Jude Barber. So I'm an architect and director at Collective Architecture in Glasgow and Edinburgh. And our practice is founded on a model of non-hierarchy, inclusion and fairness. So the way we live and breathe our everyday practice that model is normal to us. And the principles of creative freedom, sustainability and equity is embedded into everything we do. So for us, the way we run our businesses, the finance of that, the organisation of that, the way we work with clients, empower communities, how we take a design approach of thinking around strategy and application and delivery is kind of at the heart of everything that we do. And in parallel with my studio practice, I've also co-created a number of projects and models that advocate for and empower and instill social and institutional change. These include the Voices of Experience project, which is looking at age and gender, New Chapter, which was about bringing about significant reform at the RIES. And we've seen big changes there with Sustainability Working Group and the action that they can now take at a national institutional level. So I do believe that what we do is so important, that the industry and the profession needs our skills more than ever. And the health crisis has shown into sharp focus to everybody in society how important that is. So I want to ensure that our profession is more responsible and resilient and inclusive to deal with that. And I'm delighted to take part in this Hustings because there is so much to be done. And there are so many with key skills in this area, and we need to bring that to the fore and embed it into everything we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jude. Could I go over to Nick, please, for your 2-minute statement, please?
Hi, I'm Nick Moss, a practice owner. The climate emergency clearly affects everything, and it is my #1 priority. A lot of stuff being talked about here is direct action, list of demands. I get that, but I'm coming at this from a different angle. Direction has its place for sure, but the best way to change people's behaviour isn't always head on. In fact, it can be counterproductive. Any behavioural psychologist will tell you that. Just look at the COVID crisis. People did so many things we thought they'd never do, and a lot of it was for the greater good. We were nudged into working from home, travelling less and meeting up on Zoom. They've been nudged into leading more sustainable lives, not just for the reasons you'd expect. I spent the last week talking about how procurement is choking our ability to make change. It's not for want of trying. Most architects are doing their best to create zero carbon designs, but they're getting value engineered out. We've been marginalised to the point where influence has become a trickle rather than the flood it should be. If we unlock the procurement issue, which is exactly what I intend to do with my new code of procurement, we can secure our ability to influence sustainability at every level and nudge the changes that need to happen. Then we can't be forced to compromise the work that's gone into a great building that puts things like climate change mitigation at its heart. It also needs better fees, giving practices the breathing space to be more diverse and more ambitious in creating a sustainable future. It's good to talk, but I'm a person who's interested in actions rather than words. I believe I can show you that my goals are clear, focused, and based in reality, practical actions that everyone can sign up to. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Really appreciate that. Again, Sumi, Valeria, would you take your 2 minutes?
Yes, thank you. My name is Valeria Passetti. I was born in Italy and I studied architecture in Florence. I'm telling you this because unlike all the others, I'm actually a specialist conservation architect. And my passion is heritage and the use of restorative and regenerative design and conservation. I live and work in Nottingham, which also is something that defines me. I've been a grassroots activist, engaging and listening to the concern and aspiration of architect students and associates for over 10 years. The climate change and the climate emergency is a great concern to all of them. And the RIBA has not been very forthcoming with help. The climate and ecological emergency are the biggest challenges we are facing, and how we respond will have consequences for generations to come. We are running out of time. This is not time for proclaims, this is time for action. And it needs to be our collective action if we are to succeed. I recognize that activist groups have been working tirelessly for decades, providing research and knowledge that could be shared and used to educate others in the UK and internationally. Our membership is very varied. It's not all big practices that we talk about awards, forgetting that the majority of our members work on their own, and probably the biggest the biggest project I would be involved in would be a 2-story extension. So they need our help. The RIBA has a big role to play. It must facilitate the sharing and collating of all this vital information produced by others and become the physical and virtual home of knowledge and research on the climate and ecological emergencies. Those resources must be free to students, associate and chartered members, wherever they are in the world. This is not a UK emergency, it's a global emergency. It should also include resources promoting ethical developments and how involve clients and fellow professionals to develop a humane built environment free of the exploitation of people and the ecosystems. The RIBA, again, has got a moral duty to ensure that no one is left behind by raising awareness of the climate challenges for members and practices, by providing climate and carbon literacy and actually measuring the responses received. It must start taking action against those who repeatedly ignore the warning and exclude from awards building and companies falling short of expectation. We need to raise our standard. We need to work together collaboratively and then encourage the participation of all our members if we are to be successful in challenging the emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. Sumita, could I ask you to do your 2 minutes, please?
Thank you, Indy. So I'm Sumita and I run my collaborative practice, Ecological. As my practice name suggests, I work in sustainable design, but doing this hasn't been easy. I did my parts 1 and 2 in India and decided that my design, final thesis design, should use earth bricks and bamboo, the materials found in my village. My design based on a modular construction won not just the gold medal at my school, but a UIA UNESCO International Award. On the back of these awards, I got a scholarship to study the new environmental design course at Cambridge. So I took my Indian portfolio to get it validated at the RIBA. The chair of the validation panel asked, "Have you done any normal work?" He meant projects using normal materials like brick and concrete. I complained about him, and so my validation was delayed by several months. This was my introduction to normality in the UK 30 years ago. I started teaching architecture of scarce resources at various universities. I learned normal meant environmental issues were separated from design. Slowly, I started fighting back. I started talking to whoever would listen about the climate crisis, which was just beginning to be acknowledged. I set up my design charity, which is a member of the UN Global Compact that includes not just the climate crisis, but also supply chain, diversity, equity, and other things. I was a member of the RIBA's Ethics and Sustainable Development Commission. I was a member of the Ethics Task Group. And I'm now pleased to say that my book has been adopted as part of accreditation for a design course in the US. Now, for me, that is normal. The climate crisis is part of a much bigger crisis, the environmental crisis. Our resources are not being shared equitably. It is an ethical crisis. And that is why I have ethics in my manifesto. We now have less than 10 years to overcome our environmental emergency. As your president, I want to challenge you to think differently and think globally to help mitigate this disaster. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for everything. I appreciated your your introductions. I'd like to take us to the first question, and we've had questions coming in since the registration, and all of you have made really important points of where you think the RIBA needs to go. Now, where I'd like to push the next round of questions, and you'll have a minute to respond, is what are the first 3 actions, real actions, right? So, you know, are we going to change awards? Are we going to change our award structure fundamentally? Are you going to advocate that and that? I want to see, you know, are we going to change our, you know, sort of amount of capital spend that you have, but actually to outcomes? What are the 3 real actions that you're going to take as a president in order to deal with the scale and the kind of reality of a climate emergency? The RIBA has declared a climate emergency, but we've seen very little impact yet. So we need the next president to manifest it. So with that, I'm going to open up to Jude, please. Would you come forward with your 1-minute response? I know the time is not enough, but we'll try to keep it tight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, given the urgency of the situation, my first role, as president would be as president-elect. So from August 2020, that's when action would begin. So the first thing would be about listening and preparing, ways of doing. So I would take on board the expectations that you shared with us actually through the ACAN, AD and AED and review that together and embed it not just into how we work in practice, but also within the organisation itself, right the way through the core of the organisation itself. Secondly, I would rapidly seek to raise our skills, both in education and practice. So building on the tools and resources that are available to us to ensure that we shift our focus to enable and address that as part of our everyday practice and learning experience. And thirdly, I would build on the good groundwork that the RIBA has actually done already. There are already documents and strategies there. So we need to acknowledge that the broader ethical aspects of that, for example, through the Sustainable Committee report, take forward the actual 2030 challenge and take that right through into practice.
Thank you, Jude. Could I please go to Nick? Hi, Nick.
Hi. My first action is to work with the best and brightest minds to create a green thread of climate change mitigation to be intertwined with Hackett's golden thread of information through the whole building process. My second action will be to incorporate that into my code of procurements because it's crucial we work in collaboration with the wider construction sector to solve the issue of our time. And my third action will be to get people to sign up to this by any means at my disposal, including the huge resources of the RIBA, whatever works. I'll be relentless, again, because it's the issue of our time. And by the way, I've kind of taken my first action. I wrote an open letter to industry leaders asking them to sign up to the principles of my code. In the space of a week, that letter's been read over 25,000 times and counting. I believe it's caught people's imagination and people want to change on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we go to Valeria, please?
Thank you, Indy. My manifesto is all about members. It's about empowering members. It's about allowing them to upskill, but allowing them a structure of support that enables them to be the best architect they can possibly be that during their education, be as first entrance into the profession, and then as professional. So the first thing I would do, I would work towards to making sure that all members fully understand and work towards the target set in the 2030 climate challenge that the RIBA Council approved last year. I would make sure with this that the RIBA provides the appropriate resources to enable all members to comply with the target, upskill their employees, upskill themselves from CPD to calculation tools, understanding what the carbon embedded is, how can be measured, and life cycle energy costs. I will also raise awareness of the benefits of circular economy within our members, because I don't think many people understand that. In the use of alternative materials like the reclaim and biodegradable materials, and research into new material. The second thing I would do, I would lobby government for a full planning and building regulation review in relation to the climate emergency. I would ask for a better response to the request for a green recovery. And I would ask for a full support of the retrofit campaign, which as a conservation architect specializing in the reuse of buildings is incredibly important. And thirdly, I would talk about a reform of the architectural education. We need to put the climate emergency at the heart of the curriculum. And we need to teach our students and future architects to design, how to design within planetary limits. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. Could I go to Samita, please? We can't quite hear you yet.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it said the host had unmuted me, so it's okay. So I've got like 5 things I would like the RIBA to do as for members. So first of all, I would urge all architects to commit to the UN's Sustainable Development Goals and Architects Declare. I would like net zero carbon design become compulsory CPD. So if you look at your CPD thing, you can do it, but I just want to make this compulsory, so otherwise it wouldn't be validated. The other thing I'd like to do is that all RIBA prizes should include measurable sustainability and ethical compliance in the eligibility criteria. It shouldn't be just a tick box thing that you just say, oh, I've done that, but it should be measurable and demonstrable. So all architects should apply ethical considerations when choosing projects, building materials, labors, and supply chains, because these have a huge impact on the lives of the poor around the world. The institute should collaborate with other building institutions and work towards a green recovery plan, and further on to design zero carbon healthy cities. All chartered architects should aim for net zero design by 2030 as part of their membership criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumita. Could we go to Simon, please?
Thank you, Indy. As you made the point at the beginning, what can we do? I think, first of all, if we transform the RIBA and set up the right structures, we can set up the potential for change in the future. I was chair of the Architecture Foundation. It was in big trouble. We called on the help of practices, clients, and consultants and contractors. And we rebooted it under the leadership of Ellis Woodman, and it's become a very powerful voice. We are not one industry. We are a disparate group of people and practices, but with a shared aim in this, to make a better society, build better buildings, but also to be with a focus on the ecological issues. So we've got to focus. For me, it's about the RIBA, the House of Architecture, sharing and capturing best practice. If we do that, we can then talk to clients and prove to government that it's not our desire, it's successful, it's essential, and it's valuable. Public and private sector clients and consultants come together, a carbon alliance, bang, there's something with real power. Smaller details, but really important. We can put our institutional weight behind post-occupancy evaluation. If we can't ensure and reveal real data, we will end up, as I think we have done for a good number of years, lying to ourselves about what sustainable design is. And if we become brave enough, we will say where we failed, and that will be really, really important. So I think that's where the RIBA works. It gathers together best practice, clients, consultants, collaboration, and data, and takes it out to the world, to government, not as architects arguing their case, but the wider community who commission buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. So I think we've started to get into the spirit of this, which is that we want to start to get a little bit more detailed. And I'd like to keep pushing as the questions go on. I'm going to keep pushing on this side. So one of the big influences for obviously the RIBA is education. Now, if we look at education, how do you think the RIBA, and how will you, as its president, ensure that all schools of architecture can deliver graduates with proven capability to design net zero buildings? How will you drive that? And I really want to get us into, like, we know there's a whole bunch of technical issues here. There's a reliance with PARB and various other things, which we know is in the middle of transformation. We also have a government which is not necessarily lined up with the way that we think right now. So I kind of really want to push, how will you do that? So if with that, could I open up directly to Nick, please? Nick, would you open us up into this question, please?
Teaching students net zero carbon design is critical, and from what I've seen, students are really, really passionate about this part of their education. But from my own experience in teaching, there really isn't enough experienced architects and engineers in education. We urgently need to bridge the gap between education and practice, like you've just said. Also, because solutions and research are constantly changing and improving, we need education that has a foot in practice as well as academia. For me, it's essential we re-establish RIBA validation on all courses, otherwise qualifications shouldn't be recognised. This will allow us to push the agenda we want within the RIBA. I believe we should draw attention to those seeking to find easier methods to get round this. As part of this process, I'll seek to ensure teaching staff's qualifications and relevant experience is also listed. You can't just pretend architecture is happening and you're not part of it. We absolutely have to produce competent, capable graduates who can drive forward net zero carbon solutions. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Can we move on to Valeria, please?
Yes. Right, sorry. Yes, I would develop a new validation criteria to respond to the environmental and climate challenges we are facing. We want the climate emergency to be central to architectural education. We want education to be more technical and scientific based. We're running away, we as architects are running away from the science behind everything that we do, and we must stop this because we are facing a challenge that requires a multifaceted understanding of what needs to be done and how to do it. I would also make it compulsory to teach students to design and construction within the planetary limits. We need to have stronger links between practice and education because the students need to be supported all through their education by a mentoring. I would introduce mentoring scheme. I would also make sure that students are helped choosing the right mentor. And I will make sure that the people offering mentoring or even PPE to be compliant with the requirement of the climate emergency. So it would be a system to exclude those that are repeatedly avoiding to comply with the requirements. And finally, I would like to see the RIBA supplying extra resources, learning resources, to bring that awareness from students sooner rather than later, rather than just waiting for the school themselves to catch up. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. Can I go to Sumita, please?
Yeah, so education, as you know, I've been teaching for so many years and I've really struggled with sort of getting this together. And environmental design, as I used to teach it, used to be tagged on. And I've really struggled to get it all together. But even now, I find that the Professional Code of Conduct, which mentions both sustainability and ethics, is not really tied up with the criteria for validation. So there are steps there that needs to go from one side to the other so that when our graduates come out, they are actually very confident that what they're designing is low energy, sustainable and ethical. And I think that's the point of it. And also the other thing is global. So as president, I would like to bring this global perspective. I'd like to bring this challenge to schools of architecture here in the UK, because the RIBA is an international organization and we forget that our materials and sometimes the labor come from all over the world. So it's the supply chains that needs to be ethical, the extraction of materials and the materials that we use. We need to think about those aspects as well. So I think there's sort of overhaul of the education system is needed. It needs to be less about the UK, but more about the entire planet if we're going to tackle this.
Thanks, Rita. Can I go to Simon, please?
Thanks, Indy. I was Vice President for Education for 3 presidential terms. I support a thing called teaching practice that I put forward, which is a model that's been adopted by places like the LSA. I am incredibly wary of the RIBA telling schools how to teach. I think it's restrictive and it's dangerous. the carbon agenda is fast evolving. We don't have enough tools in the profession as it is. What we've got to do is, I mean, I think the young people will demand to be taught, and they will not go to schools that don't. But what we must do is say, we are on a journey. It's a hugely important journey. We are researching in professions and we're researching in academia. So a better understanding of basic physics that place architecture in the wider context of the planet's physical systems, to me, is the definition. The rest of it is research and background. Otherwise, we will start prescribing things and we will get it wrong, and we will drive a generation through, not with the essential architectural kit of thinking, but with a set of orthodoxy. So teach people the physics of what we're trying to achieve, talk about asking the right questions, and then making sure that when they come into practice, they push us in practice to do ever better. And as practices, we engage and research with academia. But I don't think the RIBA should be telling the world what to do.
Thank you, Sam. Jude,
Thanks.
can I hand over to you, please?
Okay, thank you. Well, I think, obviously our architectural education begins at university, and it could be challenged that in fact it should begin before that, so looking at the school curriculum actually. And also our education doesn't end when we leave university. So it's important that we communicate to universities that addressing the climate emergency needs to be embedded into the full running of the organisation, teaching staff, visiting tutors, management, and including net carbon design within that conversation. So really, this is a journey that we all need to follow at every step in our career. And we do need graduates and architects that are equipped to ask the right questions, to think for themselves and develop ideas. And that's inherently linked to this issue. But another key thing is busting some myths about the singular genius, about heroic buildings, and looking at that collaborative model about how we work as an industry and across a number of sectors to achieve that. So there's a number of practical things we can do. We can redefine priorities in terms of the RIBA validation process and the criteria and the standards that sets out. Ensure that that responds to societal and environmental challenges at large, including net zero carbon design, and embed those learning outcomes into the curriculum in a kind of coordinated way across the university landscape.
Thank you. Jude, can we go to Nick, please?
Nick, we can't hear you. Sorry, hang on 2 seconds.
Thank you. Okay, so start the clock again. I refer to my previous answer, which is my new code of procurement that the whole industry signs up to ensure that architects are involved in direct action against climate change. But the other things that I want to really start looking into is encouraging all manufacturers to clearly publish whole cycle energy ratings so architects can reliably factor sustainability into their choices. Other aspects are just things that we can just work with the RIBA, but I think just concentrating on just a few things, procurement, getting us back to be influential, will allow us then to push these things through.
Thank you. And I'm going to just take a moment here. I think what's becoming very clear when we listen to your answers is that, yes, and listening to some of the questions that are coming in, and Nick, it was great that you followed up on that, is that there is a challenge here about actually manifesting this story. And I think what I suppose I want to keep pushing on here, and I'm going to give you all a few seconds to come back in on, is that we need to be able to make change, but it's evident that the RIBA has deeply struggled to make some of these transitions. So many of these good ideas, and many of you have been on these committees, many of you have been advocating this stuff, but manifestly, we've not been able to make the change. So if I could just give you literally 5-6 seconds each to just come back on this, because I really would love just to kind of ratchet this up. And I think, Simon, you started to open this question up and say, well, actually, we we can't teach it, but we have to drive the result. Should the RIBA be supporting PEs? Like, let's push this on a little bit. So I kind of, you guys have all been in the RIBA in some fashion or another. So we all know, actually, it's struggled to be able to manifest it. So I'm going to really come back to you for a moment. Nick, I'm going to give you 2 seconds. I know you've actually had a second bite of the cherry, but you could just keep it precise to that, because I really do want to give extra time to everyone. Nick, could I give you 2 seconds on that? Really drive
Well,
this.
my issue is, you're absolutely right. No woolly promises. One clear, crystal clear, focused ambition. We get 2 years. I will sort procurement out, which directly affects our ability to mitigate the climate change emergency. There you go.
Oh, great. Valeria, let's drive this through quickly.
I must say that I haven't heard a word you said, because your sound was really, really bad. So I try to interpret what you said from what Nick said. But are you asking us what is the one thing that you think that you can do within the...
I can repeat.
Could you? That'd be great. Sorry.
Totally. What I was saying was that I think you've all been in positions of power in the RIBA. You've all been driving some of these questions in terms of educational transformation. We know it's a critical thing. And I really want you to push forward to say, what are you actually going to do? You've all been in positions of power, and we know the RIBA has significantly not moved. And I want to push guys here that let's make some real transformation. We know it's critical. So Valeria, where would you go with this question? Like, we know our schools of architecture are in actually desperate challenge right now as well. So it's not straightforward. We know, is the RIBA going to use its 59 million endowment and actually say, right, we're going to support PhDs in research, which we know there's just not enough research funding. So I want to push this forward.
I think in terms, as I said, sorry, can you hear me? In terms of what we can do with education, we have to review the validation criteria and make climate change part and parcel of how we are going to allow schools to be revalidated. But I also believe that the RIBA has got a huge part to play in supplementing whatever is done in education. It's not an excuse saying, but the establishment refused to follow us. As I heard so many times in any meetings I've had, well, but the school like to have their independence of thoughts and direction. We cannot wait anymore. We cannot fail our students. We cannot fail our future. So the RIBA needs to step in, provide the supplementary resources, provide the information. We have got a wealth of information that we can disseminate and help the student with that, whilst we're trying to make sure.
Thank you, Valeria. I mean, I think that's a really good point. Smita, I'm going to jump one and come back to you, so you will get your moment. Valeria, I'm going to jump from you to Simon, because I think there's a really important point here, which is that I agree with you that all of Simon's got, these resources exist, but Simon's got a really important point here, which is he says, in reality, we just don't know. And the reality is, I think our schools of education need to be pushing practice. It's not necessarily practice pushing schools. Maybe it's the other way around, in which case we need to empower our schools of education with the research and talent capabilities to actually challenge practice. Simon, I thought you were hinting in actually not over legislating, but really empowering them, in which case, how would you do that?
Thanks, Indy. Look, I hate I teach, I practice. To me, it's architecture. I hate the divide. I don't put a different hat on when I go into a school or into a practice. To me, it's about answering that build with design, best practice, smart thinking. Schools don't want to be cramped by the RIBA. It's not a good thing for architecture or the future. And there's definitely leadership in schools. And a lot of good schools would say they are already leading. What I'd like to see is practices, teaching, engaging with education. I'd like to see students flow from schools into offices and back. That makes education accessible and affordable. And research, we're doing research with UCL into low embodied carbon in inner city developments. We're not doing it on our own, and we are using the research mindset of universities to make us think as a practice. We're bringing practical skills with our 8 BREEAM outstanding, our low carbon, but the world is full of myths. We're finding that a CLT concrete frame has got more carbon in it than a post-tension concrete frame. So let's not say it's simple. We've got to actually research, publish, learn. That's what I'd like the RIBA to become for practices and education, a place of research, publication and learning, and accepting that ACAN and Architects Declare might have different views. And that's fine too. It's not a one fits all.
Thank you so much. Samita, you've got a wealth of experience in this. Please bring us in. And I know you were giving us some specifics already. So like you're president, right, your first mandate, you get a state of the built environment address. We've given it to you. What are you going to do for us?
Okay, I wasn't sure whether I was meant to answer your first question. You asked about changes, bringing changes. Is it part of one thing?
It's really about we know the scale of the change that's necessary in terms of education.
Yes.
And actually pushing forward, like how would you manifest this? You know, you've been part of various education programs. How are you going to really drive that home? Drive that home. Are you?
Okay, so first of all, to change the system, you have to change the actions. So I have listed various things that I'm going to do, and the RIBA has produced so many roadmaps and reports, but some of these are not practical. So what I want to do is turn them into practical action. Now, 2 years is a very short time, but because I've been involved with the RIBA already, I can hit the road running, you know, so we're on the pathway towards implementing those. I can tell you what I've done in my NHS trust where I'm a non-exec. So for example, for a long time, they didn't have any measurable water usage in their annual reports. And it took me about 3 years to get that into the system because sustainability is part of the NHS constitution, but they weren't including water usage. So things like that I want to bring in. And I want students to actually think about what's happening with the rest of the world. A lot of the courses include, you know, architecture of rapid change, scarce resources, where they're doing projects all over the world. And then they come back and suggest exactly the same solutions as they would in London. Now, I would like to think about appropriate technology, appropriate design.
Great, thank you, Samita. Jude, could you just bring us to a close on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think I share your frustration. As someone, I've been quite recently involved. Actually, 5 years ago, I tended to sort of shun institutions and not see them necessarily as enablers. And I think the work that we've done in Scotland recently has proven that, you know, institutions should really enable and enact change and empower us to make these things happen. And so for me, there's a sort of question really around the sort of systemic behavioural issue around how we actually make decisions and get things done. So I would like to see, as President-elect, to understand that landscape and the mechanisms and why are we finding barriers? Why are we not able to enact these things? And so we've got a council, we've got staff, we've got the structures, we've got the regions. You know, what are the blockers? What are the things that are preventing us from taking these really incredible reports, strategies, active research? How do we actually do that? So the question for me is about understanding that from those who are currently frustrated by that process. So it's systemic, it's behavioural, and in the end of the day, we all know the real way to getting things done is in the detail, and it's usually in quiet, quite laborious action, you know, to make sure that there's, you know, these things are actually going out into the processes and procedures and schools and practice. So it's a combination for me at scale, from the systemic strategy through to the detail of how we actually deliver. Great.
Okay, so I'm going to move us on to the next question. And I think, thank you for sort of ad-libbing with me a little bit. Now, in terms of the next question, many of you mentioned, obviously, the relationship of practice. If we genuinely believe that we are in the middle of of a climate emergency, how are you going to support architects to take the direct action that's necessary at speed and scale, right? And as a president of the RIBA, how will you take direct action of committing and ensuring the RIBA divests from fossil fuels and takes measures to help members to follow suit? So again, let's keep the emphasis on less sort of words, but in a way, what are you going to do in terms of pension funds, in terms of actually the building, all of these things, all the supply chains that you use? How are we going to really move this on? So I'd like to encourage us to move there. Valeria, can I come to you first, please?
Yes. The first thing I would say, of course I would. Of course I would, because it would be within the ability of the RIBA to be transparent with those processes. So we can divest from fossil fuel, but we don't. I think what the problem is sometimes, when we talk about the RIBA, people see 66 Portland Place. The RIBA is a national and international organization. So we need to open up to the idea that it's not just one place. There is not just one set of rules that once they have been adopted in London, that is the RIBA done. So I'd say, yes, we need to do it. We need to move away from fossil fuel. We need to look at how we invest. I mean, we're all aware of Project William. We're all aware we've got an employees pension fund. We're all aware of those investments. We need to be transparent and see that those investments that we make are profitable, but also align with our ethical beliefs. And the ethical beliefs that we want to our membership to adopt. So I would say, yes, we do it in London. In terms of wherever we are, we do it at regional and international level, offices and structures. I would actually require, at the same time, how do we then translate it into the membership? I would create a requirement for charter members and practices to declare what action have been taken to follow the example of the RIBA, and I would make that part of maybe the renewal process, the ability to become charter members and charter practices, and then we can only. Sorry, Indy.
No, sorry, I'm just conscious of time. That was all. We're running close. If you have a last sentence, I'm happy to have it. But Valeria, shall I move on?
I would say that, and again, I believe it should be successful in tackling climate change if the entire membership fully understands what is asked of us, nationally and internationally. Otherwise, our proclaims will be empty. We need action, and we need action now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, sorry. So, yes. Samita, could I come to you as well? And again, I just want to put this hint on this, which is that it's architects, but we know architects have limited power as well. So there's been many questions about this in the chat. How are we going to create the conditions for architects to be able to respond, and how can we do this? And how can the RIBA leaders and you as president?
Yeah, so my uncle, who was a farmer, he complained that over the years he'd seen the waters receding in the river, the banks being eaten away, etc., etc. And recently I visited my village, and the entire sand on the side of the river had been taken to make concrete somewhere. And these poor villagers had been left with nothing. And I've actually put a post on my Twitter feed about it. So the thing is that when we design something, what I would like all architects to do is a very simple thing. Start looking at, say, a poor farmer somewhere and say, okay, what action will I take so that this person on the other side of the globe is not harmed? You know, in the NHS, we have something called do no harm, but architects don't follow that. They just design buildings somewhere. And our course is so Eurocentric, and all our stuff is so Eurocentric. We're not thinking internationally. We're not attracting a global audience, which thinks about those issues. So I would like every architect to think about that farmer somewhere, in a poor region.
Thank you, Sumita. Simon, can I come to you?
As I understood it, Indy, you were talking about actual what change would make in the RIBA. Is that you know, to actually make it function? Is that the?
No, it's architects. So how do we support architects to take direct action?
Okay, fine. Look, the RIBA, funnily enough, has global presence. It has members around the world, and a German architect wrote to me recently saying, "You're lucky to have an institute with the standing you have." So it has that, even though we love to berate it. To me, it's nothing without its members, right? So if you don't get members, that's why students are given free membership, to try and get them to join. They don't need to join. So let's be clear about that. So we should be a net zero carbon institute. That's fairly simple, something we should do. There should be no committees in the RIBA. There should only be projects, because committees' ideas die, projects' ideas live. We should support practice and academia. That's the model I'm talking about. We should shrink the institute and go online. I mean, you know, the drawing collection, the archive, all those things should be online. Everything we do should be captured and shared globally. We should allow freedom of speech and debate, because we are not one group of people. We work around the world, and that's a benefit if we bounce ideas around. So that's why I've talked about a house of architecture. It harnesses talent, it supports it, it becomes an institute of ideas, and you let people build on that knowledge base. Don't tell them what to do.
Thank you, Simon. Jude.
Well, firstly, I'd support all those architects and organisations taking direct action and being sort of, you know, pushing this agenda, clarifying to us what we need to do and how to do that. I think building on those skills and expertise. So as president, I would focus on sort of positive and collaborative models around that and how we build that into our practice. See ourselves as part of that wider ecosystem and working, I mentioned this before, working with other organisations, and some more support and promote circular and regenerative models, and see this as an opportunity, because if we can harness that, if we can master that as a, excuse the word, but if we can harness that as a profession, then that only strengthens our position in society, and that then makes us more effective and more purposeful and relevant. So, you know, we need to use our regional and federal model to work across regions, to understand our differences, understand what's common, and to share that knowledge and learn to actually empower one another, because the RIBA is us. We are the RIBA, you know, it's not this thing, it's us and what we do. So we need to change our mindsets to shift our focus, to realize that actually we can take control of that and we can enact action. We can enact that, and that is what the organization has to do for us.
Thank you, Jude. Nick, could I come to you, please?
If we unlock the procurement issue, I've been saying it most of the night, we can secure our ability to influence sustainability at every level and nudge the changes that need to happen. It will give us greater strength in the system. We can prove best practice whereby architects stay client side, or use different methodology, or the requirements of how architects are employed. We can ensure the public sector leads by example. Procurement is an incredibly powerful tool for public bodies to empower change. Most architects are working under design and build, and we are the imposter on the contractor's team. Pushed out with most contractors working at a loss, or they certainly are in the north, we're finding. But clearly the tragedy of Grenfell has shown the horrific consequences of poor public procurement. If we can move up the value chain, we will gain the influence we need to push through the very agendas we've been talking about tonight.
Okay, thank you so much. We are running a few minutes over time, so I hope you'll be with us for at least 2-3 minutes over, but I'm going to come to a last question, and hopefully if you guys can all answer with brevity as well. The frame is this: many of you said there's a role of government, there's a role of, whether Nick, you've rightly said, procurement. The question is, the RIBA has very little power and relationship with government right now. In fact, we have a government which is perhaps unwinding many of the things that we would like. So I'm really curious, how are we going to build a relationship with government? In fact, you could argue most of our relationship, even with citizens, is really the 1%. We don't really have a broad relationship with citizenship and the public. How are we going to build a relationship with government and citizens to make this transformation that every one of you is calling out for? And I think, recognizing very few presidents of the RIBA actually have even been to number 10 or have even seen the Prime Minister in the last 10 years, well, 5-10 years. So I think there's a really big issue here of that relationship. So could I come to you, Jude, as our opening? How are we going to do it? And how are you going to advance government to build the regulatory infrastructure to go for net zero carbon construction and other issues? Jude, can I come to you?
Well, I think one of my motivations for standing actually is the extreme gaps that are forming, the spatial and social inequalities that we're seeing heightened right now. And I actually think that presents us with an opportunity as architects to get around the table, because never, more than ever before, every single person in this country understands what good or bad architecture can do for them. We've had it brought into sharp focus, and I think that really presents us with an opportunity to ask the hard questions of our government, to be very, very direct and very, very clear that this is not a party political issue, this is a ethical issue, and that actually what we do and how we do it and how we think and how we can mobilize is actually critical to the future sustainability of our planet, not just of our country, not just of our neighborhood. And so that, for me, making sure that that conversation is center stage and very, very clear to the public, not just ourselves, then I think that allows us to put pressure on the government and make sure that we are part of that conversation, because we just need to be having it right out in public and being brave and saying these things and calling inequalities out and calling out the problems that we see spatially.
Thank you, Jude. You're going to put fire to the feet of government, and I think I wholly welcome it. Nick, how are you going to build this relationship to transform procurement? You're muted, Nick. Sorry.
It's Fridays, I've not had a drink.
Yeah, fair enough.
Serious, it's the answer is very simple, and it's Grenfell. It's the main reason I'm standing. Enough was enough. People seem to have forgotten about it, but there's people in government who certainly haven't. The relatives of the people who were killed certainly haven't. We owe it to those people, but we owe it to the broader population to sort ourselves out, to sort our industry out. I'm going to have 2 years if I'm elected. It's a very short period of time. I will be laser-like with my premise of a new code that I will make people sign up to. Then with evidence-based research, we can prove how there is a better path. And then this, my hope is, will drag along the private sector as well.
Okay, great, thanks. Valeria, could you please?
Yes, well, everybody said why they stand. Well, I stand because I have been working from the grassroots all the way to being VP membership with members. We have got amazing people within our institute, people that
Valeria, can I come in? The question was very much, how would you influence government?
No, I understand.
Yeah.
The point is that what we have seen recently is we've seen a marginalization, and the reason why we're not called to talk to government is because of that marginalization. So I think we need to, first of all, talk to the public and establish a relationship with the public. Show the public what architects do. Regain that trust. Regain the ownership of the architectural debate, which the RIBA has completely delegated to university, institution, even to the television, where we are not even represented above the expensive one looking fancy. We need to change the whole perspective of how the public sees us. And we need to be outspoken about the inequalities in our society. I agree with Jude. Jude, put it very well. There are inequalities. This pandemic has shown this inequality. Our role needs to emerge from this. We are part of the problem at the moment. We need to be part of the solution, and we need to be outspoken, and we need to take back control of the ethical aspect of our role. We have a moral duty to provide the solution to the inequalities that are being created by our work in the past. And we need to do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Samita, how are we going to influence governments?
Can you hear me? So
Yes.
I've had my time in the public sector, and I've worked with government bodies and the movers and shakers who influence our built environment. They're also looking for guidance, and sometimes, you know, they need our help too, but we don't recognize them. So we have to find individuals who are willing to listen to us and work with them. So there are many MPs, including my local MP, and she's really interested in these kind of issues, and she's been pushing that. So I'm working with her. So I would like the Institute to take bold steps and collaborate with other like-minded organizations, such as, you know, Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth. There are lots of other organizations that are working towards towards the same aim. I attend meetings in the Florence Hall, and it's packed with an organization that's looking to reduce energy use. And I don't see architects there. I'm thinking, where are they? You know, why aren't we all working together? So we have to remain relevant by collaborating with other organizations and also with other building organizations. So I know RICS has done a lot of things. Structural engineers, if you go on their landing page, the first thing you see is they say they're a global organization and they work on ethical principles. And that's the sort of attitude. I mean, when I see the landing page of the RIBA, I don't see anything of that. So I would like that to be made to be very clear. And as I said before, whatever action you take, think back to the poorest person that could affect. Thank you.
Thank you, Samita. Simon, can I come to you to close this round of questions?
Thanks, Indy. You spoke of citizens and government. I'm reading a book at the moment called The People of Providence, and it's about a housing estate. It's a social history. I think we've got to be careful when we talk about what we know and what we can do. We are part of the solution, but a maverick one-off designer like Will Alsop once said to me, consultation is great, architects need to listen. And so I'm very clear, we are not one group of people, we are diverse. We need to listen and consult with citizens. We need to exhibit ideas and share them with them. We need to get their feedback. We can do that online and do it through exhibitions and events. That's really important, become a listening profession, one that has visions, but then test them. We make buildings, a lot of us make buildings. We make buildings with clients. Clients have money and they have power, whether it's the public or the private sector. If we work together with the clients and the other consultants, we as architects who are very good at leading collaborative teams can take a much stronger voice. And a lot of clients say to me, they're shocked at how little contact we have with government. We can take a stronger voice to government, not an arrogant voice, not an all-knowing voice, but a voice that puts together sensible, intelligent ideas about how we can help build a low-carbon future and a more equitable society. But when we're in charge of it, like we were after the war, it wasn't very good.
So thank you. Thank you to all the candidates. I'd love to thank Nick, Valeria, Samita, Simon, Jude. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for being part of this conversation. I think this is a really important moment, not just for the RIBA, but actually us as a country and globally over the next 10 years. We will see our built environment transform. And the question of leadership of the RIBA is significant. It is the best, it's the most well-endowed institution amongst the profession right now. So I think this is an important debate, and I think we shouldn't stop right now. This will carry on, and this needs to carry on beyond the presidency all the way through. I really want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I'd love to thank ACAN for actually driving this conversation and making this possible. So there is a little Bishop's Arm drinks going on, so feel free to join us there and carry on some of those questions. I really appreciate everyone's time And I think I really appreciate everyone's contribution. This can only be done together with all of us working together through some of this stuff. Thank you once again.